Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Tanya Talks. I'm your host, Tanya Ricketts, joined by my guest this evening, Effie Altomare, where we are going to be discussing saying yes to healthy boundaries. So, welcome this evening, Effie.
Hello, everyone.
So, we are just before we begin tonight's segment, I'm just going to quickly segue into asking everybody to subscribe and like to Tanya Talks for on Instagram and Facebook. And I'm looking forward to this discussion this evening about what it means to say yes to healthy boundaries. So I know that Effie and I have had a lot of very healthy discussions on what it means to love yourself and to set healthy boundaries in our lives. So I'm going to let Effie, you open it up and share with our audience what exactly that looks like. Share a little bit of your story and your experience with creating healthy boundaries.
Well, throughout the years, Tanya and I have had many, many discussions about boundaries. I mean, for myself, I really didn't have any boundaries. Boundaries were something that was foreign to me, and I didn't really understand what that meant. A lot of the times I thought boundaries was being mean or being selfish. I didn't realize that actually setting a boundary was something that was going to help me and help me achieve a better, I guess, quality of life for myself.
And what did it look like? Did it look like saying no to people? Did it look like
Absolutely. It was
speaking up? Did it look like
definitely saying no to people was huge for myself. I wasn't really aware of what no meant. And do I say no? Do I not say no? And if I say no, am I being mean or is it the right thing for me to do? So there was a lot of questioning within myself about what the right thing to do was. Was if I did say no, um, did that affect the other person? And did it really affect me? What the consequence of no is. And, no had a big power for me. I always felt had always a sense of guilt and feeling bad when I actually did say no to someone.
right? Because I know that we've had many discussions with, and it leads into what you're saying, is that you really do feel mean when you start to set boundaries because you're so used to being walked over your whole life or allowing people to walk over you.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
all of a sudden you start to set these boundaries and put it in place and push back and teach people how to treat you. And all of a sudden you walk away. And I know for myself, I can only speak for myself, that I would walk away feeling a sense of anxiety.
Absolutely. And setting a boundary sounds scary, or it sounds like, what does that really mean? Is there like a one word definition to setting a boundary? And I don't really think there is a one word definition to that. Setting boundaries is a process and it comes in time, and it's how you deal with a situation and what that boundary means to you. So there's no key answer for every person. It's a lot of trial and error. And you have to look at your life and assess about what it is that you feel that you can or cannot do or cannot deal with at that moment.
Right. And let's put it in different areas of our life because we create boundaries in different areas of our life. And I remember, one of the areas that I had to work on was with my children. I had to learn how to create healthy boundaries with my
Absolutely.
children. Being the mom that wanted to give them everything that I didn't have, and creating opportunities for them, but not realizing in the process, I allowed them to walk all over me. So when enough was enough and I pushed back and I started to create these boundaries, it was pretty scary to go through it. Um, because at least for me, I just didn't know whether
Well,
or not I could follow through
Well,
with it.
as a mother, right? You're taught to be selfless. And especially if your example of your mother was someone who gave everything to you, and then what you see in society, what you watch on movies, what you read in novels, every depiction of a mother is a selfless person. So when
Right.
you see selfless, you think mother. And that's where the gray area with boundaries actually starts. I actually, for me, myself, I thought that I had to give everything to these kids and actually just do everything for them because I was their mom and that's my job. But you're not their slave. You set
Right.
a boundary, you give them the tools to be successful, and you need to let them fail. So setting
Right.
that boundary with my kids was big because, I couldn't always rescue them. So, I've set a boundary that this is when I'm offering my help. If you want to take it, these are your windows of opportunity. If you don't choose to take that help now, my boundary is that after this time, I'm not available. And now
Right.
you have to deal with the consequence. So
Right.
that was very big for me because I am a giver, right? So doing that within my own family was also difficult. And being a
Right.
stay-at-home mom also makes you have that guilt that I'm home, so I should be available to them and to everyone else who needs me because I'm home. But you're really not home. You don't
Well,
just
I
sit.
don't know. When you say stay home mom, I have a different, like, I think any woman
Absolutely.
that's at home is the CEO of their household, because what it takes to run a household, to be at home, and to be available on schedules and it, like, I think that mothers that stay
Business.
home manage more than CEOs actually manage, with a resource of employees to help them. And moms don't have that when they're at home. So I call you guys like the real CEOs.
People who manage people's lives, right? And for myself, staying home was a difficult choice because I did enjoy my job. So staying home with my kids became a priority for me, and that's when I lost all my boundaries because then there was no blueprint of how my boundaries were supposed to be set anymore because it wasn't that I had work to do for myself. My job was now to be home. So I lost boundaries with friends, with family, with children because my job was to be available. And I tried to just be and be able to do for people, realizing that at the end, I ended up losing myself and actually not doing anything well.
Right. That's a big one. When you don't create those boundaries, you end up not being able to accomplish all the things that you'd like to because you're so spread thin,
Yes.
looking to do it all, being that selfless person that's looking to do it all.
Like
And then what are we really teaching at the end of it? At the end of the day, what are we really teaching our kids?
Well, we're teaching our kids not to have boundaries. So
Right.
our kids are going to learn from our example. We've served them with no boundaries. So they're going to serve other people in their lives the same way that I serve them. So I started to recognize patterns of relationships with my own children. And then I started to think, oh my goodness, like me not having boundaries created them not having boundaries. Now this is repeating to them what's happening to me. So I decided, you know what, I need to set boundaries for me so that I can show my children by example what it means to respect yourself and make yourself important, right?
Right. Right.
Boundaries so they can understand their what they should be expecting other people to treat them.
Right. And for everybody listening out there, it's, especially when it comes to our children, it's a little bit of a more sensitive, because we deal with mother's guilt at the same time. And I remember the first time really setting boundaries with my children, and I wanted to cave and give in. And, it was really, really challenging to stay strong in meaning what I said. Um, and they had to learn, right? Like that mom had a
Yep.
boundary, she had a limit. And I can't say that they believed it the first time or even the second or third time, but it was the consistency. And it was very challenging because you felt like, oh my gosh, am I doing the right thing? And the only reason why you question that is because you're not used to operating from that mindset, from that behavior. You're not used to being that way. And they do eventually get it, but it's not it takes a while for you to anchor yourself with some consistency, I find, in creating the boundaries.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Consistency is key. Like for me, I had to take people out of relationships away and reintroduce them with those boundaries. So I had to take time away from myself. Not that they did anything wrong, had nothing to do with that. I had to take away from myself to realize how can I have these people in my life and set those boundaries. And there's constant tests because there's people who come back in your life and you're like, okay, I'm ready, I'm stronger, I'm better, I feel like I've done the work. And then you invite this person back in your life, and all of a sudden go back to an old pattern. And you're like, okay, you know what? This was a test. I'm not ready, or I need to plan and think before I invite this person back in my life how I'm going to deal with it. It really doesn't have anything to do with anyone else, but within yourself.
Right. It's interesting. My own daughter had made a comment. My younger daughter had made a comment, and she said, it's almost like you have to walk into a room and you give off the presence to people that they know there's a limit of what they can say to you, how they treat you, what they can ask you. And I was amazed that she was so young and she figured that out, because I'm thinking of myself, and I'm like, I didn't figure it out too much later on in my life. You'd walk into a room and there were no boundaries. It was open playing field, whether I felt good or didn't feel good. It was an open playing field as to what you could ask me, what you could say to me, what you could ask me to do. And I would surrender to all of it, but not feeling good about surrendering to it.
Absolutely. It's the position that we've allowed ourselves to be put in.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a learning curve. So
Mhm.
it's a way, it's a lesson. I've done that many times. Like okay, let me give me 5 seconds to put my makeup on. And no, I gotta go now. And now I've left. I haven't prepared myself. And it may not be a big deal, but I needed that 5 minute of me time. So no, it was like, okay, let's go. No, give me that 5 minutes. Allow yourself to have that time, but you have to be in that space. You have to get to the right place. And you actually have to surround yourself with the right people with the same mindset. Because the minute you surround yourself with people with a different mindset, you start to trip up and you start to release those boundaries and you start to let people take advantage a little bit more every time. Because being a person who's a giver, it's just kind of like having some kind of a trait that is always going to go back to that place where you just want to give. But so you have to surround yourself with people who are going to respect that and allow you to have those boundaries in order to be able to give according
Right.
to what you can.
Right. And it's interesting when we talk about it, and you just hit on something that struck a chord with me. Is when you usually, wherever it started from, usually people that have no boundaries just started out their life being taken advantage of.
Absolutely.
So,
I think it's also media. I think it's like for myself growing up, I always just what I read, what I watched, what I saw, it was like good versus evil. It was always a good and a bad, where there's really no definition between a good and a bad. Like selfish is a bad word for me, always growing, but really it's not. It's when you really look at it, being selfish is taking care of yourself. I mean, not being selfish to the detriment of someone else, but being selfish to protect you is a good thing. So I feel like there's such a gray area between good and bad. And for myself, being a female, looking at the roles that were around me, they were always selfless. They didn't do anything for themselves. They just gave to people. It was the martyr theory, right? That you had to be the martyr to achieve the greatness in your life. You didn't need stuff to give. And you don't think that affects you, but it does. And I didn't realize I was doing that to myself, that I was sacrificing myself until many years later, and many conversations that we had. And I was like, you're right. I'm exhausted. I have been driving for 6 hours and I live the closest. People are leaving practice and going to Barrie, and I'm still on the road. So, I think back to those days and I realize, yeah, you know the ideologies and the beliefs that I accumulated as a young person really brought me in that path. And it's not a bad thing because I think we're great people, but creating those boundaries were a struggle.
and when you talk about that, what it reminds me of is I grew up around a lot of people that did a lot of mind manipulation. So there was a lot of narcissism, a lot of mind manipulation, and it was all in the efforts of being able to extract from me what they wanted and benefit to them. So when I got older and I was in my 30s, late 20s, early 30s, I positioned myself in all environments to be the go-to person that just fell into that role.
Oh, absolutely. I hear you. I've
And
known you in that role. I've known myself in that role. It's a control. We're in charge. We're going to take care of it. And
right. And you
rely
don't
on,
ask for help.
no,
And I can actually admit that I had attracted individuals in my life that were friends that I thought were friends that initially rolling out in the initial stages of the relationship. And I call it the romance of any friendship, any
absolutely.
relationship. It's all good and dandy, and you're so willing to help, and they receive it. And the minute you give a little bit of resistance, like it's not going to happen, they actually manipulate you into getting what they want, and you give in and concede to it because that's what you're used to, that just feels familiar to you. And when you start to realize that it's not sustainable, and later on when you have a family, and it's not sustainable to take care of people from that level, from that space, all of a sudden, you either walk away miserable and feel used and abused, or you stand up to it. And standing up to it means that you may not have them as friends anymore.
Well, you're setting a boundary, and that's a risk you're taking. So if
Hmm.
they're your friend, they're going to understand, right? I feel that. So what I've always struggled with was, seeing the good in people. I have a pretty positive attitude. And a lot of the times people will say to me, oh, you live in la la land, or you see things a certain way. But I'm not, and for a while I started changing that, and I started to be see things more, I guess, realistic. But and or it's not that, and then see things the way that they wanted me to see it.
And oh, I was going to say, what's realistic? Like,
What
what?
was realistic for them? Like, just because you do something and I'm choosing to look at it that positive way that perhaps you didn't anticipate or intend to do it in that manner, doesn't mean I'm not aware that you're trying to fool me or you're trying to hurt me. It means that I'm going to choose for myself to look at the good in you. Because when I'm going to look at all the bad in you, that's going to attach to me, right? So if somebody per se does something to me, I'm going to always look and give that person the benefit of the doubt, but doesn't mean that I'm naive or I'm allowing them to walk all over me anymore. It means that I'm going to choose to look at it this way, but now I know I'm guarded with you, but I'm going to still choose to learn something positive from it. So if you are that person, don't change that about yourself.
Right.
Continue to be who you are, because we do have people who want to see the good in people and want to see that, yeah, maybe you did steal that pair of shoes that I had, but maybe you needed it more than me. And you know what? Now I'm going to be a little bit more protected and set boundaries with my things around you, but I'm not going to choose to see it as a something evil or bad, because that's going to attach to me.
Right.
Right. So that helped me create boundaries as well, because I didn't change who I was anymore. And I was worried by changing the boundaries, I would change me. I wouldn't be nice anymore. And you know what? I don't have to be nice, but I would like to be nice.
And it's interesting when you say that, because where I get triggered when I hear you say that personally is, when I say to hear people use the word selfish, I say always replace that with loving. I don't mean to be selfish.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah,
I say, well, then get that out of your vocab, because you're thinking from the place of selfishness because it's coming from
absolutely.
you. And I always say to people when they're learning how to create boundaries, look at it always from just constantly use and live from the space of love. And when you're living from the place of self love, then you will automatically realize that you're emitting that love out there, that it's not personal. It's about me learning how to love myself. And when I can learn how to show up healthy and loving for myself, I can show up being healthy and loving towards you.
Exactly.
That for me was really, really big in learning how to create boundaries. I remember making the decision, like what you said, those people that are going to respect your journey will still be around, and those people that aren't will go, because then you'll start to find out the people that were actually really just taking advantage of you and using you.
Yes, absolutely.
So, right. So I remember when I started to learn how to say no, and it was a scary thing for me when, somebody would call and they're so used to, everybody's got that friend that
Yeah.
says yes all the time. You say yes to all
Yeah.
the time, and they've
Absolutely.
never heard you say no. I always say to people, when you're creating boundaries in your life and you're coming to a healthier place for you, you have to realize that people are always going, not always, there are
Yeah.
going to be people in your life that want to know why you're saying no or why you're not able to do. You don't owe anybody an explanation
Absolutely.
for your boundaries but you. And that's when I started to realize that I didn't have to explain my boundaries to anyone. You either took that I couldn't do whatever it was, I wasn't available, or you didn't.
Yeah,
That was
absolutely.
a tough place to be, though.
Like the first time I had to say, like I said no, and I think the person was like, "Oh, what do you mean?" I go, "I can't. I'm sorry. I'm not available." And you know, eh, and they were like, What are you doing?" Like they wanted a full explanation, and not they were trying to be hurtful, but they just like what, like why? Like they were like, "Okay, you've always said yes. Why can't you pick up my kid? Why can't you drive my kid? Or why can't you pick up my groceries or help me do my shopping?" It's like, because my house is a disaster and my kids need food, and if I do it for you, that means I'm going to have to pick up takeout and do nothing at home. But you will be okay, but my end will be a disaster. And that took a long time for me to understand. And a lot of times when we don't have those boundaries, we're also running from something we don't want to deal with. Right. So by doing everything for everyone else, you could be avoiding something that you haven't dealt with on the inside, or something that is a problem for you in your home or in your environment, or somewhere else in your life that you're avoiding. So not having boundaries could also be avoidance to other issues you don't want to deal with.
Right.
That was a key moment for me, because I did, by helping and being out there and doing all this stuff, which I do love to do and I still do. I realized in order, when I created those healthy boundaries, I had to really assess me. I had to really look into me and see, well, what was I running from? Why was I doing this? What was it feeding inside of me to be this person who was doing everything, right? And helping people. So that allowed me to see that, okay, you know what? I got to deal with this. I got to deal with that. I'm still helpful. I still have tons of friends, all great people in my life who understand that sometimes I can't do it. And I actually don't even have anyone really asking me for anything anymore.
Right.
It's myself. I'm like, oh, I'll help you out. I now can offer the help as opposed to someone asking. When someone asks me, I'm like, oh, great, you need my help? Oh, you know what? Actually, I can do it on Wednesday. So it's not like I'm so overwhelmed like I was before.
Right. And that when you say that you can give, I just said to somebody yesterday, I said, the most unselfish thing that someone can do for themselves is to learn how to receive. And they
Absolutely.
said it took
That's a
them a
tough
while.
one.
That is a big, and here that the most unselfish thing for you to learn how to do is to receive. Why?
And
Because when you receive, then you actually fill yourself up to be able to have something to give. So without being able to receive, you've depleted yourself in the giving. So you eventually exhaust the ability to give.
absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great way to look at it. I never thought about it. Fill your, and you know what? I guess it did, because we used to do those gratitude buckets with the kids, or fill someone's bucket, and that's, you have to fill your own bucket before you can fill someone else's.
Right.
So
And
that,
that's my advice. Like I actually, funny enough, I wanted to do a post on it tomorrow, just to share that, because when I had the conversation with somebody that was talking about this whole receiving thing, and creating boundaries is setting yourself up to be able to learn how to receive. Is what it does is it doesn't deplete you. It allows you to stand still, and it allows you to stop pouring things into your life that are unhealthy, but be intentional with what's coming into your life. So you're vibrationally and energetically setting, you're putting up a wall to say, wait, let's stop for a minute, let's slow down, let's reset, let's be intentional, let's think about this. Then we can learn how to be unselfish by learning how to receive, so that we are able and capable of giving.
I agree with you. I think that's amazing. That's a great way to look at it. And, I feel like if I could go back to my younger self and say, it's okay, you're going to be fine. You can say no. There'd be like times, even little things like, um, do you want to go to the mall? And I'd be like, okay. And I'd be like, no, I don't want to go, but I feel bad saying no, but I'll go anyways because I feel bad. And that
Yeah.
was huge for me because I'm
Well,
like,
the
I
people
feel
pleasing, right?
bad.
Like we don't want to. And
Exactly.
I know I got to say this on global television with us together. And I say this because I've experienced with you personally,
Yeah.
where it's like, okay, where are we going to eat? Let's go eat
Oh
here.
no.
Meanwhile,
I still terrible at that.
you don't even eat sushi, and I'm like, well, why did we go? And you're like, oh, it doesn't matter, I'll find something in the menu. And I'm like, no, there's like thousands of restaurants out there, and you're right, it's important to be around people that see us, that are going to help us be the best person that we can be. Because it was in that moment when I discovered that with us, I was like, well, then we're not going to go eat sushi. Are you kidding? I mean, who cares if I can shout out sushi? It's about us. And when people start to embrace it of being collective and it being about us, when you're friends, I get that people make sacrifices, but there's a way that we can all be happy.
Well, absolutely. And I don't think anybody ever, and no, like when you ask a question, nobody intends to be hurtful. But a lot of the time, people are like, oh, she doesn't care. And that's why I created the boundaries. Not because one of the reasons I created my boundaries was because people started to think, oh, she doesn't care. Well, Effie won't care. Effie won't get mad. You know what? And I said, oh my God, I created this image and this thing, and I'm getting hurt, but they're not realizing they're hurting me because I've always just said, I don't care, whatever, whatever. So it created this hurt inside me. And I'm like, no, I don't want to eat. I don't want to go here, but I'm saying yes. And I don't like this place, but you're still thinking I'm going to go because I'll be fine with it. But it wasn't their fault. It was my own issue. And that's why I knew, okay, I have to create boundaries, because now it's not just a boundary about what you can say or where you can go, what you can do. It's about yourself, right? No, and when you allow people, or people start thinking the notion of like, oh, she'll be fine with that, and they start to say, oh, she's gonna, well, I can't do it to her or him because this person's gonna be upset about it. But don't worry, she won't care. We'll just not bother with her, and then you start to become fall lower and lower on the list of priority because you're not going to care as much as you thought you were being accommodating and supportive. It actually didn't work in your favor. It actually became that you weren't valued in the way that you should have been. When you did, and I realized, and it was hard for me, when you demand value and you demand respect, people will give it. When you tried, and I tried to teach this to my kids by example, and it never works. I show them to be caring, I display loving. Until I demand it, or I put a boundary, it doesn't happen. Even by showing them by example, by taking care of them, treating them well. If I'm not well, they're not offering me a tea or a soup because they're like, oh, mom will be fine. But the minute I say, guys, I need some help, I really like it if you brought me a tea, I don't feel well, then they're like, oh, okay, I've created a boundary, I've put a request in place that'll follow. So that was a difficult thing for me to accept because I really always felt that things have to happen harmoniously and naturally by showing my family, my friends, what it is to be caring and nurturing and a good person. So I thought, I'm doing all these right things, but nobody's actually giving me anything when I need it. They're actually just thinking I don't need anything, and I'm keep depleting and depleting, and I'm getting lower and lower, and I have no way to get back up
What's
because
interesting is you didn't see you, so nobody else was seeing you.
exactly, exactly. And you know what? I never realized that I didn't see myself as valuable because even though I like myself and I thought I did see myself, but I obviously didn't because I didn't ask for anything or I never said anything. But I guess that comes back to, again, our childhood. I believe that our childhood builds our characteristics for adults of who we are. And we can change that as time goes along. But it initially sets us in a very set stone way because as a child, I come from a family of three. I have two younger brothers. They were always more demanding. So for me, it was always easy. Okay, just behave, just be right, just behave, do your thing. Don't ask for anything. They're busy. Go get it on your own. And that stayed with me. Like I was invisible in my own home. Like they loved me, they cared, but then nobody ever had to worry about me. Nobody ever had to worry, was I going to school? Was I eating? Was I taking care of myself? Was I fine? Everybody just always thought, she's fine. I will deal with them. So that
And it
came.
really does start from, whether people want to, like, you hear a lot of the narratives about, oh, it's, why do we go back to our childhood? And I said, if we can approach going back to our childhood from the understanding what our belief system is and our subconscious is saying and those feelings that we're triggered by, then that's why we go into the childhood. It's not about conjuring up all these yucky feelings. It's
There's
about
no,
understanding
there
why
is
we're operating from the space that we're operating from. Really, that's what it is. So it's actually a beautiful thing to go back and understand the roots of why you are at this space you're at. So yeah, there you were. Like it wasn't that you weren't loved, but there was an underlying tone of she's okay. So
I have
meanwhile, you're not okay, but
a loving
you've been
family. My
told you're
parents
okay.
were amazing. And it wasn't like they did anything wrong. It was just they had to divide and conquer. So who needed the most was who they gave. They had three kids. They didn't speak the language. They worked. And I have amazing parents. My mom is still like so supportive to my family to this day. So it's not a blaming thing. Looking into your childhood, you're not looking for an excuse or a reason. There's nothing wrong with me
It's
today.
just a level of understanding.
Understanding of where I developed no boundaries. So, and always feeling like I'm fine, I take care of it, I'm by myself, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, I'll just help everyone else, came from what I saw and came from who I was because I was invisible because they didn't have to worry about me. So as I got older, I just gave to people because I thought that's what you do in order to be valued, in order to be a good person, or to achieve that level of peace in your life. You help people because that also fuels you inside with some kind of feeling of warmth, of being kind and good, right? Because at the end of the day, every good gesture not only impacts the person you give it to, but also impacts yourself, right? I remember taking a course, and that was very difficult for me because I always thought that I did things not selfishly. I did it because it was good for someone else, but it was also good for me. So, that's where my boundaries came into place. And that's why creating those boundaries was difficult, but it was one of the best things that I ever did for myself and my family and my friends.
Right, right. And as I'm listening to you talk about, everybody's got different experiences, that we arrive to the same destination of being that person that doesn't have
Yep.
boundaries, but everyone it comes from a different experience in the earlier years for everyone. For me, I figured out very early that if I had a need, that it was a burden. My needs were a burden to people. So that I figured out very quickly that once it became about somebody else, I was embraced, accepted. So I learned very quickly to do for others because yeah, that's how I received my acceptance.
And you're loved.
And there was no needs because my needs were it was my needs were a burden. It was a burden to, if I needed something, it was a burden, it was too much. I was made to feel that anything that I needed just
Yeah.
was bothersome.
It was non-existent, and then nobody would want
Right.
it.
So I learned very quickly to survive. I got that acceptance, that praise, that accolades when it became about somebody else. And obviously, it's not sustainable because when you start to do this spiritual work and you start to get into all this stuff, you realize it's actually not the truth for you, that you do exist and you do have to, it is about you receiving in order to give. There has to be a balance of the give and take.
Absolutely.
So when I started to learn what it was like to create boundaries and to say that it was okay for me to be included in the equation, it was a game changer. And it really started to filter out, I had a previous guest that used the words, friends out of proximity. And it became filtering out the friends out of convenience,
Oh, absolutely.
where I was the convenience in their life. And the
It-
minute that they weren't able to extract all the things that they were able to before from me, I became nobody to them. And that was a gift for me.
well, you look
But
at our
the power that I took back was amazing.
But you think we started our friendship in a TriStar at the gym with our kids. Our kids went completely different directions, and our friendship still maintained because it was a real friendship. I see
Right.
friends, like friends of convenience when you have kids the same age, and then something changes and you don't see these people, and it's not and it is not a bad thing. And people have to understand it was a friendship of a time, and it went right.
Hmm.
Served its purpose and it's gone. But then when you can foster the friendships, like some of our closest friends today are people that I met through my daughter's soccer team. And my daughter hasn't played with these kids for like 8 years. And they are like family, more than family to us. And those friendships were sustained from something else with boundaries because they were started out of convenience. They moved into something else. And then we created boundaries and allowed them in our lives.
Hmm.
And then people just filter in and out according to where you are in your life.
Right. And setting boundaries, for anybody listening, it is such an empowering thing.
Yeah.
That day that you say no to somebody, or that day, when I started to set the boundaries of what people were allowed and not allowed to ask me, that, I used to say to people like, oh, why are we asking this? Why are we talking about this? Like, what purpose does it serve? And it was a game changer for me because then it allowed me to create space to have conversations that offered value and meaning
Well,
versus, or asking me questions that not just were none of their business. It really did that. Maybe that's what it is. It
you
just
don't want to,
really,
you don't even have to explain it. You don't want to answer the question.
right.
You're
And I
allowed to know.
remember just, and I love being in the
Yeah.
space that I'm in because people understand that there's just, I have a girlfriend that taught me very well. Like, people ask you questions that you're not comfortable with, just keep looking at them with a blank face. And I was like, well, why would I do that? And that was strange to me. Why would I do that? She said, because it doesn't deserve an answer. If they were silly enough to ask it,
Yeah.
why answer it? And I remember giving it a shot, and it was extremely uncomfortable.
But I think there's also that honeymoon phase of saying no. When you get
Right.
that power and you're kind of giddy after, I'm like, oh no, I can't help you. No, I don't want to do that. No, it was when you kind of go in an overdose of no's, and then you're like, okay, I gotta get it out. Like, I don't know, for me, a lot about we're quite close, so we know a lot about each other's personal stuff, and particularly one very toxic relationship that I had for many, many years. I actually had to set a boundary and say, enough is enough. I cannot answer you. I cannot talk to you. I can, when you're ready to enter my life based on these conditions, then you are more than welcome to contact me. But until then, I cannot. And that set me free. I was so fearful to let go of that toxic relationship
Yeah.
because I felt like, oh my God, like I'm going to lose it. I need to save it. I need to fix it. And when I actually, after many conversations that we had, and you helped me get through this and get rid of that toxic relationship, I was free. I
Yeah.
felt free, in because not because like I didn't want this person, but that person was dragging me down, and I needed to set a boundary to say, I'm happy to have you in my life. I'm happy to do this and this with you, but I cannot be doing A, B, C, and D for you anymore. I
Right.
cannot be that person for you. So, giving them the power to come back when they're ready based on what you've decided to set for yourself, I think was very liberating for me. And it
Mm.
was like a freedom I cannot even explain how I felt.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I know what that feels like.
Yeah.
I want to touch upon a little bit about creating boundaries with finances, because a lot of times we don't create our boundaries with our
Yeah, I
finances.
am terrible with finances.
And I realized that it was a deeper issue than finances. It was that it was more, it was the acceptance piece, or the denial piece of, I feel denied of something, you
Well,
know. I never want to feel that feeling of feeling denied.
we always I don't know, I'm not going to speak for the general, but I think that a lot of people, what we do is we define having money and the value of money with being successful. So
Hmm.
if you have stuff, that means you have money, which means you're successful, which means
Hmm.
you're happy. So you've achieved something. Like a lot of people look at to define it, what people are wearing, what products they're, what kind of bags they carry, or what kind of homes they live in, or what they're spending on their children or on food or whatever you choose to spend, whatever your vice is, right? So I think we see that as the equivalent of success. So I think for myself, I never really valued money. I just thought it was like a resource that just kind of like turning on a top of water. It comes, it goes. Like it's not. I kept saying, doesn't money doesn't matter, but really it does. And for me, that was key in learning that money did have a value, not just a denominational value, but it had a value, a personal value. And having money didn't mean you were successful or you had reached a hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy, that you got to the top or something. And I always equated to that, and spending to make others see or make yourself feel valued. Those are things we need to realize, and setting boundaries with my kids with money, because my kids had really no boundaries. It was like, where I have one daughter, the oldest, and my second daughter, they have completely different understandings of money. So you can see where I changed. With the first one, there were no boundaries. It was, what do you want? Do you want 10 pairs of shoes? No problem. You want me to buy you 15 outfits? Sure. What do you need? 300 bucks? Take it. But with the second child, I started to develop boundaries. So she's like, oh, do you think it's a good idea? I should buy this. Is it too expensive? Should I wait for it to go on sale? Okay, I made this much money for my birthday. I'm going to save this much. It wasn't that, being cheap, because I always thought, oh, being cheap was such a bad thing. But being frugal or cheap is not something I'll ever be, because I can't, I don't think I could even grasp that. But I think to be smart with your money and create boundaries of where you spend your money is really, really important. I think that comes with you when you start setting boundaries for yourself.
Right.
Once you value you will value your money, and you will create the boundaries instead of going out and paying for everybody's dinner every time, or buying
And
all.
that's what it is, right? Like
Yeah,
when you said paying for everybody's dinner, like for me, money is very important for me in my life. And I remember when I was learning to, overcome my own poverty, and not realizing that that poverty um, came with it, just how I was feeling emotionally impoverished.
yes,
And money for me came from that, again, the original narrative, where it didn't matter how high I climbed the corporate ladder. It didn't matter how much money I came into and had access to. To me, that money belonged to everybody else but me. So my kids would be okay. My husband would be okay. My sister would be like everybody. I wanted everybody to be okay. But at the end of the day, I was in a deficit as a
absolutely.
result of that. So when I started to realize that,
Personally,
what, sorry?
financially and personally.
Right. So when I started to attach the understanding of the relationship and that make that connection with how I was emotionally, I had no boundaries in my life personally. That personal relationship that I had with myself was now being carried over into my finances. I was like, wait a second, this can't be. So when I started to pull back, and people didn't know, it was just a personal thing with me. When I started to pull back and start to learn how to have a healthy relationship with myself, I didn't have that need. It was no longer about taking care of them through finances. It was now learning how to take care of myself through finances because I mattered now. Now I was in the equation. So I
Absolutely.
created that boundary that if I had a dollar, I no longer thought, who was I going to give it to? I was now the person I was giving it to.
Yeah.
And that was a game changer for me personally, was understanding how to walk away from that belief that even through eating, I would make sure that my family ate like anybody that knows me, my family would be eating super healthy, but I had no boundaries with my own self. I ate whatever I wanted. I was feeling crappy. I
Yeah.
wasn't feeling the body the way I wanted it to. But again, it was about everybody else.
Absolutely. And I think that when we do that, it really doesn't benefit anyone. Because, I said to my daughter one day a while back, I said, she's like, "Oh, mom, are you wearing that top?" I said, "Yeah, what's wrong with my shirt?" She goes, "I don't know. You always wear it and you've had it for so long." And then I turned to her and said, "Well, I'm always buying you new tops. So I never buy anything for myself." And she's like, "Well, I never asked you to do that." So I'm like, "Oh, hell, look at this. This kid is like getting all the," and she was right though, because she wants to see me wearing something new. Your kids,
Right.
they, they want us. They don't understand that when we're doing all this stuff, we're sacrificing ourselves. And by sacrificing ourselves, it's not doing anything for them. It's actually
Right.
just hurting us. And that's when I was like, you know what? That's true. I am going to go and buy myself a whole bunch of new stuff because you know what? I deserve it and I want to look nice and I want to feel good about myself.
Absolutely. Well, whether, and every parent, especially mothers, us
Yeah.
mothers, kudos to us, because we go through hell and back with her, especially our female children. Okay.
Yeah.
And in spite of all the challenges that we face, at the end of the day, we are still the role models. We are still the ones that inspire them. So deep down inside, they want to see us happy. They want to see us succeeding. It's just they're going through their hormone changes, right? So
Absolutely.
I feel that we have a divine responsibility to really set the tone by loving ourselves so deeply that we teach them by example to have on how to love them. We can't give away what we don't have. So if we're not doing it for ourselves, we're not doing it for them. And setting a boundary to me also includes setting a schedule, setting some consistency.
Oh, completely. Especially now during COVID when we have no schedule.
Right.
A whole new havoc, right? But like I do think that like for myself, being a person who's chosen to work from home, to not work outside my home, that did create a lot of animosity for me because I never felt valued. So I'm constantly teaching my daughters that I'm not just your mom. I don't just, we all cook and clean here. This is not my responsibility. I'm your educator. I help you with school. I can write essays better than anyone. I may not be able to help you with math, but I can help you with every other problem. I am
And
your
don't give me
lawyer and your advocate in your sport or in your school. I help you get a job. I'm your chauffeur. Like there's a lot, and I try to explain to my kids all the roles that I play in their lives that I'm able to do so. And no disrespect to moms who work because outside the home, because we all work, that's just as difficult and it has its own challenges. But I feel as females, if we can embrace and support people who choose to stay home and people who choose to side the home and not make each other feel less, like men don't do that to each other, but women do.
right,
And
right.
that can create these walls and these separations, right? And therefore, and that's where I had a kind of an issue because I'm home and there'd be people who were working outside the home who'd be like, "Oh, she can take care of it. She'll pick up the kids, or she'll drive here, or she'll
That
feed.
is big. You
Or
are
no, but just drop them off at her
absolutely
house.
right.
She'll fix it. I'm not tired." No, you know what? And that was a boundary that I had to learn. That was huge for me.
That is, I have to touch up on that. And I couldn't emphasize that enough.
Yeah.
That is such a misconception to
Yeah.
anybody listening out there. And being at home, I remember in the early years being at home with the kids, it really is a dumping ground. You are absolutely correct. You become the dumping ground for everybody else around you because Effie's at home, Tanya's at home. You really be, and you actually, just based on the original belief system that we came out of, we embrace it. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, we actually believe that, and I know I'm only going to speak for myself. It was this honor that, oh my gosh, I'm staying home with my kids. Like, I felt so like this was such a
It was a
beautiful
privilege.
gift.
I felt like it was a privilege,
Right.
and
And,
it was a sacrifice
well,
because
I didn't know that at the time that it was a
no,
sacrifice.
and I
To
said
me,
to
it just felt like an honor. It felt, you're right. It felt like
myself
a
at the time,
privilege.
it
It
felt
felt
like
like
a
an honor.
privilege.
So
And
when somebody came and
yeah,
gave me something, it was like, yeah, 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 I can do it. I feel so fortunate that I can be at
privileged. I'm so
home.
fortunate to be.
Right. And then before you know it, you have a rap sheet of everybody coming to you. And you're like, wait a second, how come I don't have time in the day? Why am I spent? Why am I
Yeah, I've just
stressed?
spent like 6 hours, and now I've done nothing.
Right. So, and then you realize your home's neglected and that doesn't feel good and you don't feel good and the
And now
kids are demanding more. So you can't even show up for your kids and forget the husband. The husband's nowhere to be found.
they're always missing. But
Right.
like, but I remember like waking up at 5:30 or 6 in the morning just to get ready, prep my dinners and my lunches, do my laundry, vacuum. So when they woke up, I could get them to school. So then I could go help someone else or do a
Right.
volunteer
Yes.
somewhere or
Right.
drive somewhere else. So by 9 o'clock, I've already spent 3.5 hours of work. And then I'm not going to bed. And then after everyone goes to bed, I do everything that I didn't do in the day till 1 o'clock in the morning.
Right. And that's you. I remember for years working on little sleep until finally, again, it's not sustainable. I say to people,
Absolutely.
when you're not living the truth of who you are and you are not loving yourself, it is not sustainable.
No,
You
absolutely
you
not.
burn out. You
Yeah,
burn out. You just can't do it.
absolutely.
And I look back now and I'm like, I don't know how I did it back then,
Oh,
but I remember waking up thinking when I started to attract girlfriends in my life that were showing me that they were showing up for themselves and I became their dumping ground and I couldn't figure out why I was their dumping ground to picking up their kids or making food for them or this. And I was the one that was the dumping ground, but they were comfortable to show up for themselves. I
it
was
was
like,
like, I
it,
totally understand. I know when they're dumping their kid to go work out, and
right.
you're
And
like,
I was like, okay, well, I don't have time. So, but again, it
but
came from that. It wasn't them, it was me. I had that narrative in my head that as long as
yeah,
everybody else was taken care of, that was okay. That's where I got my acceptance from. And when I no longer wanted that to be where my acceptance came from, but I wanted that acceptance to come from me, those friendships just couldn't exist. They couldn't survive.
no, absolutely, 100%. And you know what? Those friends can come back. I've had friends in those type of relationships that have come back better. And
Right.
actually, we have a way deeper and more connected friendship
Right.
because we did have an understanding. And I have a friend who's apologized that, I now looking back, I did really take advantage of your kindness,
Mhm.
and the fact that I knew you wouldn't say no. There was times when I was like, okay, I could do this, but you know what? I'll just ask her. She'll do it. And,
Mhm.
it took a lot for this person to admit that. And it made me feel better that, okay, yeah, you knowingly took advantage of me. And now you understand that I did the right thing by setting that boundary and saying no and pushing you away, not pushing away, but actually setting you away until you could come back and be the friend that you could be to me according to those boundaries. But
Right.
again, we have to take responsibility that we created these issues by not seeing ourselves, by not valuing who we were, or having the notion that we had to be selfless. And, coming from, I'm home, I'm here, I can do it, I can help it. And also fueling something inside of us to fill a void that perhaps we were not getting filled from somewhere else.
Right. And I want us to take the focus away of being at home more than everybody in the audience to really understand. It really has to come down to a belief system of what you were raised by, of who what you were taught your role was.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's really what it is. It's the role that you've been taught of who you were that allowed you to have no boundaries in your life
Yeah,
and not create that no one taught you how to love yourself in a healthy way is what it comes
absolutely.
down to.
Absolutely.
And the beautiful journey is it's such an adventure. I say it's fun. I love this work. I say it over and over again, but I genuinely love this spiritual journey of self-help and really getting to know yourself more deeply. So I actually embrace that because it gives it really a lot of life, a lot of depth and flavor.
I
Um,
I think a lot of those aha moments that we're having, and it's when you surround with yourself with people who want to celebrate those moments with you.
yes,
So like, I remember when I was saying no or I was creating the boundaries, you were like my biggest cheerleader. You're like, yes, yes, you said no. That's fantastic. You'd be like, Effie, can you pick up the girls? I'd be like, I can today, but not tomorrow. Like, and you're like, oh, so you can't? And you'd be like so excited. Okay, you said no, that's fantastic. You're setting your boundaries.
right.
Amazing helping me to do that and to recognize that I didn't have boundaries as well, right? That was key for me. I think that we're in a rut, or we're in a pattern, not a rut. We're in a pattern of doing things and going that we don't realize until somebody points it out or something happens. And a lot of the times for me that was you, pointing out, saying, okay, you don't have to do it. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's so right. It's so true. And that's what the kind of people you want in your life, who are going to still love you and want to be with you, even though you're not giving them what they want, but
Right.
they're pointing out something that's going to help the other person, which is truly a selfless thing. You're
I
not.
just kind of think to myself where I'm at in my life, just because I really believe in energy and I study energy.
Absolutely. Yes.
I just think if somebody is coming in, I am doing my very best to show up authentic. So anybody that's around me at this stage of my life knows that at the best that I can at this moment, if somebody comes to me and asks me, like, I'm just going to be as direct as I can be. And I respect that in return. So because I understand who I am and I accept who I am, I can now accept you who you are. So if I come to you and ask you to do me a favor, I am going to give you that opportunity to say no because it means more to me, not that you're doing me the favor.
Yeah.
It means more to me that you're showing up authentic.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it could mean, and I say to people all the time, if you're saying no to me because you just want to take a nap,
Yeah.
then you say no to me.
Yeah.
When I started to realize that, for anybody that knows me, I am a periodic, no, not a periodic, frequent
Now.
nap taker in the day.
Yeah.
I do not shy away from it.
And there's
I
nothing.
get up really early in the morning, and it was challenging for me to set my boundaries, over 16 plus years ago when I got into this line of work, that people didn't understand that I was doing something outside of just being at home with some children. And when I realized that I was getting up so early in the morning to get work done, by a certain time of the day, I was tapped out. But I would keep going and going and going to be that energizer, but to just show up for everybody. And when I couldn't do it anymore, I would say no, I couldn't do things, turn all the phone ringers off, and I took a nap.
That's amazing.
And
I
I
took
didn't
5 minutes.
care about it.
Yeah. I think that's incredible.
So those were my boundaries for me to show up in a healthy way for any. That was my authenticity. My brain required sleep, my body required sleep, and then I could get up and have the evening with my family. And those were those boundaries that were created. Because I think what we see on the outside with people, we judge people thinking, oh, they have time, or they this, or they that. But we actually don't know what goes on behind the scenes.
No, absolutely not. And sometimes you'll have someone call you and say, listen, I need a big favor. I'm in a big jam. You may not be able to, but you'll try to squeeze that in. Having a boundary doesn't mean you're always going to say no to that person, or, okay, or you can't leave something you have to do behind because somebody really needs you. You have to be able to look at it, assess it, and make the right choice for
Right.
everyone at that time. So if someone's calling you, I broke my leg, I need to go to the hospital.
Oh, that's a different
Yeah,
situation.
I have to
Right.
say, oh no, I'm going to take a nap
I
right
gotta
now.
take a nap right now.
I have 4, so I totally, I agree with you. Like, setting those boundaries is hugely important, and it's definitely impacted my life for the better and made me a better friend, a better mother, a better daughter, better wife, in all those respects of every role that I have, that I play. Because by setting those boundaries, we do fuel our body. We give the fuel for ourselves. We fill our bucket. And when our bucket is full, then we can give.
Absolutely. It's interesting because when I started to realize some of the my own boundaries after I felt good creating boundaries with individuals and
Mhm.
even in work environment situations, and even with clients that would show up late and setting boundaries there, like, look,
Yeah.
you show up late, that's on you. Like, it's got just setting those boundaries, I remember realizing now there was another layer of boundaries that I needed to set for myself.
Mhm.
And that was I started to turn off my phone ringers.
Me too.
Where
Huge.
I was like,
I
to
do
this
that
day, my
24/7.
phone ringers are off. I would say 80% of the day, my phone ringer is not on.
That's the biggest complaint people have about me. My ringer's never on. It's
Right.
it's not, I don't do it because I'm trying to be mean or miss your call. I'm doing it because I need to turn off, right?
Right.
And I don't want to always be, I can't always be available, right? Like turning off my ringers for me is like I'm it's just, I don't know, it's a powerful thing.
It is. Between not watching a lot of the media that's out there, there was a lot of things that I created boundaries that if I was going, it is easy, no matter how strong of an individual you are, we are visual people, energy travels. And if
Absolutely.
you're constantly bombarding yourself with all these things and all this information coming to your brain, unconsciously, you are on an information overload. And when I really started to understand the concept of energy and information overload and how everything is very subtle, I created that boundary by turning off the ringer, um, limiting, my technology time, maybe watching the news once a week.
Oh
So
yeah,
for
the
any
news is huge. I saw
right,
the news too.
especially in these times. And I trust intuitively that the information that's going to be sent to me is going to show up, that I don't have to be in the news every day to figure it
Yeah,
out. And
absolutely.
so far, it's worked. So we've got 3 minutes to wrap up. And I know it went fast. I'm like, we're just getting started. Uh, literally.
We've just scratched
uh,
the surface.
the what? Sorry?
Just literally cracked the surface.
Yes, we have really. um, are there any last words and any advice that you can give to our audience on how they can say yes to creating healthy boundaries in their life?
I think that you, to create those healthy boundaries, I think that you really need to sit and think about what works for you. And if doing something or having someone in your life or allowing some type of behavior, if that is affecting you, and if it is hurting you or affecting you in any negative way, it's okay to create a small boundary. You don't have to cut the person out forever. It doesn't have to be definite. It can be temporary and it can be very, very small. And a small boundary can give you power to create bigger boundaries.
Right. It absolutely, that's a
Yeah.
powerful one.
Yeah.
Small boundaries create opportunities, create bigger ones. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I just want to read that we've got Sophie writing in that money does matter. The one that has more spends less, and the one that has less, they spend more and on non-necessary things.
Oh, yes,
So
that's
thank you for that, sharing that, Sophie, with us. We are going to be joined tomorrow by Josephine Marcellin, who will be teaching us about setting up our environments for success. Thank you for tuning in. Effie, thank you for
oh,
this lovely conversation on setting boundaries. I think it's an important one that people need to really understand how to set up and invite into their life, creating healthy boundaries. So your insight and your conversation this evening was
thank you
very
for
nice.
having me,
Thank you.
everyone.
Yeah, so, and we look forward to having you come back again and
Sure, can't
having
wait.
another chitty chatter with us.
Yeah.
Uh, Remember to like Tanya Ricketts for on Facebook and Instagram. And if you are looking to take your life to the next level, please visit tanyaricketts.com to find out how you can get started. We are also casting calls for couples that want to share inspiring stories on how they take care of each other in relationships and how what makes them uniquely successful in their relationships. Please visit tanyaricketts.com, fill out the application on how you can be a guest on Tanya Talks to share your story and your testimony with us. We are also looking for males. Tanya Talks wants to create this space for you to share your story uniquely on what it feels like to the heart of a man. And we just want to hear from you, the heart of each and every one of you men out there, just creating a space to heal, to share your story, and to give a testimony for you, for your voices to be heard. All right, Effie, thanks again for joining us this evening.
Thank you,
And thank
everyone.
you guys again for tuning in.
Good night.
Good night.